Have you ever wondered why some people seem to create miracles in their lives while others struggle with the same challenges year after year? What if I told you that the difference isn't luck, circumstances, or even talent, but rather a divine gift you already possess, yet may have never fully activated? Imagine for a moment that within you lies a power so profound, so transformative, that it literally shapes the reality you experience every single day. This isn't wishful thinking or empty philosophy. It's the foundational truth that visionary spiritual teacher Emmet Fox revealed to the world. Imagination is humanity's supreme gift, the master key to the kingdom of God that resides within each of us. Has this ever happened to you? You've visualized something with intense emotion, perhaps a challenge overcome, a relationship healed, or an achievement realized, only to witness it materialize in your life, sometimes in ways that seem almost magical. That wasn't coincidence. That was your divine imagination at work. What you're about to discover might surprise you, especially if you've been taught that imagination is mere fantasy or childish make-believe. In reality, imagination is the sacred bridge connecting humans with the divine, a living, creative force flowing through you as surely as your breath. It is the spiritual DNA you share with the Creator, the proof that you were indeed made in the image and likeness of God. Look around you. The chair you're sitting in, the device you're watching this on, the building sheltering you, everything in our visible world first existed as a mental image within someone's conscious mind. Nothing material comes into being without first being imagined. The greatest achievements in human history, our cities, technologies, art, music, literature, all began as invisible seeds in the fertile soil of imagination. But here's what most spiritual seekers miss. This same principle applies not just to material creations, but to our health, relationships, and inner peace. Your life experience right now is the harvest of seeds you've planted through your own imaginative faculty, often without even realizing it. Stay with me until the end of this journey, because we're about to explore how to consciously direct this supreme gift to transform every aspect of your existence. The ancients knew this secret, the mystics guarded it, and now, through the clarity of Emmet Fox's teaching, you too can learn to wield this divine power as it was always intended. What if the kingdom of heaven truly is within you, waiting to be discovered through the doorway of your sanctified imagination? What if the kingdom of heaven truly is within you, waiting to be discovered through the doorway of your sanctified imagination? What if the very power that spoke worlds into existence is now flowing through your thoughts, waiting to be directed toward healing, abundance, and divine purpose? I see this transformation happen time and again in those who embrace this truth, lives completely reimagined through the conscious application of this divine gift. And that's why this community we're building together matters so deeply. If these ideas are stirring something within you, if you feel that resonance of truth in your spirit, I'd love to hear which aspect of imagination's power speaks most directly to your journey right now. Drop a comment below sharing that moment when you first realized the creative force of your own imagination, or perhaps the area of life where you're hoping to apply this sacred gift. Your stories don't just inspire me, they illuminate the path for countless others seeking the same transformation. This ripple effect is precisely why I encourage you to tap that like button if you're receiving value here. It's a simple gesture that helps this message reach those who need it most, souls who may be struggling with the very challenges you've overcome through applying these principles. And if you're feeling called to continue exploring these divine mysteries together, subscribing to this channel is your way of saying yes to joining a community of conscious creators, spiritual seekers who understand that changing our world begins with transforming our inner landscape through the power of sanctified imagination. Your subscription isn't just supporting content, it's affirming that these eternal truths deserve to be preserved and shared in our modern world. Now, as we venture deeper into Emmet Fox's transformative teaching, consider this remarkable truth. Imagination isn't just creative, it's redemptive. When properly understood and directed, it becomes the very mechanism through which divine healing flows into every broken area of life. The mind that has been trained to hold images of wholeness, peace, and abundance becomes a vessel through which miracles manifest with astonishing regularity. And this isn't mystical exaggeration. It's spiritual science operating through immutable laws that govern our reality at its deepest levels. The hidden truth that Emmet Fox unveiled and that mystics throughout history have guarded is that every manifestation in our external world begins as an inner vision. Healing isn't just something that happens to us. It's something we participate in creating through our consecrated imagination. The same applies to success, love, peace, and every other spiritual blessing we seek. The journey toward transformation begins with this profound revelation. Your mind is the workshop where your future is being shaped right now. Every thought image you entertain isn't simply passing through your consciousness. It's planting seeds in the fertile soil of universal mind. Those seeds grow, without exception, into the experiences you call your life. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing the shadow side of this immense power. The most significant obstacle standing between you and the life of harmony, abundance, and purpose you desire isn't external. It's the unconscious misuse of this very gift we're discussing. Many of us have developed the habit of using our divine imagination against ourselves, crafting detailed mind pictures of failure, illness, rejection, and lack, then wondering why these very scenarios keep manifesting in our experience. Consider the impact of spending hours vividly imagining worst-case scenarios, or replaying painful memories with all their emotional intensity, or repeatedly seeing yourself failing before you've even begun. Each of these mental activities is actually a misapplication of your creative power. You're using the divine gift of imagination to manifest precisely what you don't want. This isn't about blame or guilt. It's about awakening to the incredible responsibility and opportunity before you. The mindset that creates lasting change isn't complicated, but it does require a complete reversal of how most people think. Instead of using imagination to analyze problems or anticipate disasters, you begin consciously directing it toward desired outcomes, regardless of current circumstances. Behind the scenes of every authentic healing, every relationship restored, every financial breakthrough, you'll find someone who dared to see beyond current conditions, someone who made the crucial decision to plant different seeds in their mental garden, someone who aligned their imaginative faculty with the perfect pattern already existing in divine mind. The enlightened use of imagination isn't about escaping reality. It's about participating in creating a higher reality. It's about recognizing that what appears before your physical senses is simply the harvest of yesterday's thinking, while tomorrow's experience is being determined by the mental images you entertain today. Consider for a moment, what memories, worries, or scenarios do you repeatedly visualize? What images dominate your mental landscape during quiet moments? These aren't innocent daydreams. They're powerful creative forces shaping your destiny according to their kind. If you're recognizing that you've been unconsciously misusing this gift to create what you don't want, type "awakening" in the comments. This simple acknowledgement marks the beginning of a profound shift in how you direct your imaginative faculty, a shift that can literally transform every dimension of your life experience. The question isn't whether imagination is creating your reality. It is, without exception, the real question is whether you're using this divine gift consciously or unconsciously, whether you're directing this power or being directed by it. Properly directed imagination transcends mere visualization techniques or positive thinking strategies. It enters the realm of what mystics throughout the ages have recognized as authentic spiritual practice, a form of silent prayer that requires no words, only clear images held in consciousness with unwavering conviction. When you sit in stillness and vividly imagine wholeness where there appears to be illness, abundance where there seems to be lack, or harmony where conflict currently exists, you're not engaging in wishful thinking. You're participating in a sacred act of co-creation with the divine. The revelation that changes everything is this: prayer isn't about persuading God to grant your requests. It's about aligning your consciousness with what is already true in the spiritual realm, allowing that truth to flow through your imagination and into manifestation. The breakthrough comes when you realize that authentic spiritual imagination isn't about creating something from nothing. It's about recognizing and claiming what already exists in divine mind. Consider the mindset shift this represents. Instead of begging for healing, you hold the image of perfect health as already yours. Instead of pleading for prosperity, you see abundance as your natural state. The master key that unlocks this transformative approach is what Emmet Fox and other wisdom teachers identified as true faith. Not blind belief, but a living certainty that operates through sanctified imagination. Faith in its essence is the ability to vividly imagine what you desire as already fulfilled, accompanied by genuine, joyful belief. It's seeing the invisible, feeling the intangible, and trusting the process with such conviction that doubt simply dissolves in the light of your inner vision. This isn't delusional thinking. It's accessing a higher dimension of reality where the solution already exists, where wholeness is already complete, where abundance already flows. The journey from struggle to mastery begins when you discover that imagination isn't just about creating pretty mental pictures. It's about tuning your entire being to resonate with the frequency of your desires as if they were already manifest. Your emotional state becomes crucial here. Joy, gratitude, and serene confidence aren't just pleasant emotions, they're spiritual. Technologies that magnetize your imagined good into visible expression. Behind the scenes of every authentic miracle lies this hidden principle. The one who receives must first imagine receiving. They must feel the reality of their desire with such intensity that their entire being vibrates in harmony with that reality. This is the transformative power of faith-filled imagination. It bridges the gap between the visible and invisible worlds, between human limitation and divine possibility. The practical application is profound, yet simple. When faced with any challenge, pause. Close your physical eyes and open your spiritual vision. See the situation resolved. Feel the peace of that resolution, and give thanks for it with absolute conviction. Then, from that elevated state of consciousness, take whatever action is presented to you. This isn't positive thinking. It's spiritual technology, operating according to precise universal laws. If you're beginning to sense the immense responsibility and opportunity this revelation represents for your life's transformation, type "I am the Creator" in the comments. This acknowledgement is more than words. It's your declaration of spiritual awakening to the creative power that has been within you all along. Now, as we explore how this principle operates through specific examples in daily life, consider this essential question. What if your imagination was never meant to be the wandering, undisciplined force most of us experience? What if its true purpose is far more magnificent, to serve as the conscious, creative faculty through which you shape your destiny in partnership with divine intelligence? This revelatory insight forms the foundation of Emmet Fox's teaching. The spiritual journey isn't about escaping life's challenges, but about becoming the conscious master of your experience rather than remaining a victim of ungoverned thoughts. The transformation begins when you realize that most people live at the mercy of mental images that drift through their consciousness like clouds blown by the wind, random, chaotic, and often counterproductive. The breakthrough comes through the deliberate cultivation of mental discipline, the decision to no longer be held captive by every fearful scenario, painful memory, or worrisome projection that attempts to occupy your imagination. Instead, you begin selecting the images you'll entertain with the same care you'd choose the ingredients for a vital medicine, because that's precisely what they are, the components of your future experience being formulated in the laboratory of your mind. Behind the scenes of every life renaissance is this fundamental shift in awareness, recognizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the thinker, the conscious creator, the one who can direct the powerful force of imagination toward divine patterns rather than letting it wander through landscapes of limitation and fear. This mindset revolution doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with a single moment of awakening to your creative authority. Chapter 1 of Fox's illuminating teaching unveils a concept so profound it can completely recalibrate your understanding of human potential. Imagination was God's first gift to humanity after life itself. Consider the implications of this statement. Before wealth, before relationships, before earthly power or physical strength, the Creator endowed you with the same creative faculty through which the universe itself came into being. This wasn't a random blessing or arbitrary talent. It was the intentional transmission of divine creative power into human consciousness. The journey toward mastery begins with honoring this gift for what it truly is. Not idle fantasy or mental entertainment, but the sacred workshop where your tomorrow is being crafted today. When properly understood, imagination becomes the bridge between human limitation and divine possibility, between current circumstances and desired outcomes, between the visible world of effects and the invisible realm of causes. This perspective illuminates why so many spiritual practices across diverse traditions involve visualization, contemplation, and the deliberate formation of mental images. They aren't merely psychological techniques, they're acknowledgments of the divine creative process operating through human consciousness. The masters and mystics weren't just practicing positive thinking, they were engaging their God-given imaginative faculty to participate in the ongoing creation of reality. The impact of this realization extends far beyond personal achievement or material success. It touches the very essence of your spiritual identity and purpose. You were never designed to be a passive observer of life's unfolding drama or a helpless victim of circumstances. You were created to be a conscious co-creator, using the divine gift of imagination to bring heaven's patterns into earthly expression. If this understanding of imagination as your divine creative inheritance resonates with something deep within you, type divine imagination in the comments. This acknowledgement isn't just agreeing with a concept, it's recognizing the extraordinary power that has been waiting within you all along, often dormant but never diminished. As we dive deeper into the practical application of this gift, let's explore how the proper use of imagination goes far beyond visualizing material objectives. The signature revelation in Fox's teaching penetrates to the very heart of our spiritual identity. When Genesis speaks of humanity being created in the image and likeness of God, it isn't referring primarily to physical resemblance, but to this extraordinary creative capacity. Imagination is the divine fingerprint upon your soul, the ability to conceive, visualize, and bring forth ideas from the invisible realm into visible manifestation. This spiritual likeness to the Creator isn't just poetic symbolism, it's a functional reality, operating in your consciousness right now. Just as the divine mind conceived galaxies, mountains, oceans, and every living creature, your mind has been endowed with this same generative power on a scale appropriate to your being. The hidden truth that transforms lives is recognizing that this isn't a metaphor. It's the literal mechanism through which you participate in the ongoing creation of your life experience. The profound simplicity of this principle belies its extraordinary power. What we imagine consistently, with emotional intensity and conviction, creates our experienced reality. This isn't magical thinking, it's spiritual law operating with mathematical precision. Love, imagined and felt, creates more love in our experience. Beauty, contemplated and appreciated, manifests as beauty in our circumstances. Harmony, visualized with faith, becomes harmony in our relationships. But this principle operates with equal force in the opposite direction. Fear dwelled upon creates more fearful experiences. Limitation accepted as truth manifests as limitation in our affairs. Conflict visualized with emotional intensity tends to materialize in our interactions. The cornerstone insight that catalyzes personal transformation is recognizing that imagination isn't selective. It works with whatever images we feed it, whether constructive or destructive. Behind the scenes of every life breakthrough is this fundamental realization: the quality of your imagination determines the quality of your life. When you consistently feed your imaginative faculty with images of wholeness, abundance, harmony, and purpose, you're literally programming the creative mechanism of your consciousness to manifest those conditions. This isn't wishful thinking. It's working in alignment with the same laws that govern the universe. Consider the mindset shift this represents. Instead of seeing yourself as a helpless observer of random circumstances, you recognize your role as the conscious selector of the images that will shape your tomorrow. The journey from victim to creator begins with this single decision: to take full responsibility for the contents of your imagination, treating each mental picture as a blueprint for future experience. The practical application unfolds naturally. Begin each day with a period of conscious imagination, seeing your life unfolding in perfect alignment with divine pattern. When challenges arise, refuse to use your imagination to elaborate on problems. Instead, direct it immediately to visualize the solution as already accomplished. In moments of decision, project your consciousness forward to feel the impact of each potential choice, using imagination as your inner guidance system. This disciplined approach to imagination isn't about denial or escapism. It's about creating from a higher level of consciousness rather than reacting to current conditions. It's recognizing that while you may not control every circumstance, you always control the inner lens through which you perceive and respond to life. This mental sovereignty is the beginning of authentic spiritual freedom. If you're beginning to recognize how your imagination has been creating your reality, for better or worse, type "conscious creator" in the comments. This acknowledgement marks a pivotal moment in your spiritual journey, the point at which you begin reclaiming the divine creative power that has been operating through you all along. The revelation that elevates this understanding, from theory to transformative practice, lies in recognizing the precise mechanics of how imagination shapes experience. One of the most liberating insights in Fox's teaching is that imagination itself is fundamentally neutral, neither good nor bad, positive nor negative in its essence. Like electricity that can power a life-saving medical device or a destructive weapon, imagination is simply a force that shapes reality according to the images it receives. This neutrality is what makes imagination so extraordinarily powerful and yet potentially dangerous when misunderstood. It doesn't judge the quality of the images you feed it. It simply works to manifest whatever mental pictures you hold consistently, regardless of whether those images serve your highest good or perpetuate your deepest suffering. The imagination doesn't distinguish between fears visualized and dreams envisioned. It simply acts as the bridge between the inner and outer worlds, faithfully reflecting your dominant mental patterns. Understanding this neutrality represents a paradigm shift in how we approach the spiritual journey. Rather than seeing certain thoughts as bad and fighting against them, which paradoxically strengthens them, we recognize that our task is simply to redirect our imaginative faculty toward what we wish to experience. Just as you wouldn't blame water for taking the shape of whatever container holds it, you don't need to judge yourself for the images that have shaped your experience thus far. Instead, you simply begin choosing different containers, different mental images, with conscious intention. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identified as the first principle of spiritual creation. Whatever is held with loving persistence in imagination will manifest in the outer world. Notice the precise wording here, not just what is occasionally visualized or intellectually considered, but what is held with loving persistence. This qualification contains the secret to effective manifestation through imagination. The breakthrough for many seekers comes when they recognize that sporadic visualization isn't enough. 15 minutes of positive imaging, followed by 23 hours and 45 minutes of worry, doubt, and fear, simply won't produce the desired results. The mechanism requires persistence, a steady, consistent holding of the image regardless of appearances or temporary setbacks. This persistence isn't rigid or forced, it's loving, infused with genuine emotion, appreciation, and joyful expectancy. The psychology behind this principle reveals why so many manifestation attempts fail. The mind that vacillates between hope and doubt, between vision and worry, creates conflicting blueprints that cancel each other out. It's like trying to drive with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake. The engine roars, but the vehicle remains stationary. Loving persistence means removing your foot from the brake, releasing doubt, fear, and contradiction, while gently applying consistent pressure to the accelerator through faithful imagination. Behind the scenes of every authentic manifestation is this hidden factor: emotional congruence with the imagined outcome. It isn't enough to mentally picture prosperity while feeling impoverished, or to visualize health while feeling ill. The feeling state is actually the most powerful component of the creative process. It's the energetic signature that magnetizes your imagined good into physical expression. This explains why joy, gratitude, and serene confidence accelerate manifestation, while anxiety, doubt, and desperation delay it. This revelation illuminates the journey from wishful thinking to spiritual creation. It's not about forcing outcomes through willpower or manipulation. It's about achieving such harmony between your thinking and feeling natures that your entire being becomes a unified field of creative energy directed toward a single outcome. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions all align with your imagined good, you create an irresistible momentum toward its manifestation. If you've experienced moments when something you vividly imagined eventually materialized in your life, even if you didn't understand the process at the time, type "manifested" in the comments. These weren't coincidences but demonstrations of this very principle at work in your experience, perhaps before you fully understood the spiritual mechanics involved. The practical application of this first principle extends far beyond material acquisition into every dimension of human experience. The profound revelation at the heart of Fox's teaching is that human dignity itself, our very worth and purpose, flows directly from recognizing our creative partnership with the divine. We were never designed to be passive recipients of life's circumstances, begging for occasional blessings from a distant deity. We were created as conscious co-creators, endowed with the same imaginative faculty through which worlds come into being. This perspective represents a complete transformation of traditional religious mindsets that often position humanity as helpless sinners, powerless before an arbitrary cosmic authority. Instead, Fox reveals a spiritual framework where human beings stand tall in their divine inheritance, accepting the awesome responsibility and privilege of conscious creation. The journey from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity begins with This fundamental shift, from seeing yourself as a supplicant before God to recognizing yourself as an expression of God, wielding the same creative imagination through which all things were made. The revelations continue to unfold as we venture into Chapter 2 of Fox's illuminating teaching, where he describes the entire universe as God's divine idea brought into manifestation through divine imagination. This cosmological perspective provides the ultimate blueprint for how imagination functions on every scale of existence. Just as the cosmos itself began as a thought in the mind of God, "Let there be light," every circumstance in your life begins as a thought in your consciousness. This parallel between divine and human creation isn't coincidental. It's the very essence of what it means to be created in God's image. The universe wasn't formed through physical labor or material processes at its origin. It was imagined into being. The stars, planets, oceans, mountains, and every living creature first existed as perfect ideas in divine mind before taking form in the visible realm. This same creative sequence operates through your imagination every day, whether you're conscious of it or not. Behind the scenes of this magnificent cosmic drama is a simple truth that transforms how we approach every challenge. Nothing can exist in your experience that doesn't first exist in consciousness. Just as God didn't manipulate pre-existing materials, but created through pure thought, you aren't limited by current circumstances. When you understand the proper use of imagination, you're free to conceive entirely new possibilities, unbound by what physical senses report as reality. The mindset revolution begins when you grasp that your imagination isn't just for occasional visualization exercises or creative projects. It's the fundamental creative mechanism through which you participate in the ongoing creation of reality itself. This isn't spiritual theory. It's practical metaphysics that reframes your entire approach to living. Every time you face a challenge, you stand at the same creative crossroads. Will you use your imagination to elaborate on the problem, or will you use it to conceive the solution regardless of appearances? Consider the impact of recognizing that your mind is constantly creating through imagination, whether directed consciously or left to wander through habitual patterns. This awareness brings both sobering responsibility and breathtaking opportunity. The quality of your life experience isn't determined by external forces beyond your control. It's shaped by the images you consistently entertain in consciousness. This doesn't mean external challenges don't exist, but rather that your creative response to them determines their ultimate power over your experience. The journey toward mastery involves a daily practice of aligning your imagination with divine pattern rather than current conditions. When faced with illness, you imagine wholeness with such clarity that the body naturally moves toward its perfect expression. When confronted with lack, you imagine abundance with such conviction that new channels of supply inevitably open. When relationships seem broken, you imagine them restored in their highest form, holding that vision despite all contradictory evidence. This isn't magical thinking or denial. It's working in conscious partnership with the same creative principle through which the universe came into being. The transformation begins with the humble acknowledgement that while you may not control all circumstances, you always control the inner workshop where tomorrow's experience is being designed today. If you're beginning to recognize how this understanding of imagination as divine creative power elevates your entire sense of purpose and possibility, type divine partnership in the comments. This recognition isn't just a concept to contemplate. It's an invitation to step into your rightful identity as a conscious creator made in the image of the ultimate creator. As we continue exploring the practical mechanics of how imagination creates experience, let's examine the precise relationship between your inner images and the outer conditions they inevitably produce. The Genesis account offers perhaps the most profound revelation about this creative process ever recorded. When God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared, we're witnessing much more than an ancient creation story. We're being shown the exact blueprint for how divine imagination operates. Notice the sequence. First comes the mental conception, the inner image of light held in divine mind. Then comes the spoken word that directs and focuses that image. Finally comes manifestation. And there was light. This three-step pattern reveals the hidden architecture behind all creation: imagination, declaration, and manifestation. The revelation that transforms spiritual seekers into spiritual creators is recognizing that this same pattern operates through human consciousness, not just as poetic metaphor, but as practical metaphysics. The breakthrough moment in your spiritual journey arrives when you grasp that your mind is constantly engaging in this same creative sequence. Every image you hold consistently, whether formed consciously or absorbed unconsciously, becomes the template for your experienced reality. Just as divine imagination didn't manipulate existing materials but created from pure thought, your imagination isn't limited to rearranging current circumstances. It's designed to conceive entirely new possibilities that transcend present conditions. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identified as the universal principle underlying all manifestation. Our lives respond with mathematical precision to the images we form in our minds, whether those images are consciously chosen or unconsciously absorbed. This isn't a philosophical proposition. It's a spiritual law, operating with the same reliability as gravity. The outer circumstances you encounter today are the physical crystallization of your dominant mental images from yesterday, last month, last year. This revelation illuminates why two people can face identical external circumstances yet experience entirely different outcomes. One uses imagination to elaborate on problems, dwelling on worst-case scenarios with emotional intensity. The other uses the same faculty to conceive solutions regardless of appearances, holding images of the desired outcome with unwavering faith. Though starting from the same external conditions, their journeys inevitably diverge because they're literally creating different realities through their habitual mental patterns. Behind the scenes of this extraordinary creative process is a simple truth. Consciousness always precedes manifestation. Nothing can appear in your experience that doesn't first exist as a mental image, just as no building can exist without first being conceived in the architect's mind. The mindset shift that catalyzes transformation is recognizing that you are constantly sending creative blueprints to the universe through your imagination, whether by default or by design. Consider the profound implications of this understanding. The job you have, the home you live in, the relationships you've formed, the state of your health and finances, all are reflecting mental images you've held with sufficient persistence to manifest physically. This isn't about blame or simplistic formulas. It's about awakening to your creative power and responsibility. Some of these images were consciously chosen, while others were unconsciously absorbed from family patterns, cultural conditioning, or past experiences. The journey toward conscious creation begins with this humble acknowledgement. I have been using my imagination all along, but often by default rather than design. The transformation comes not from acquiring some new power, but from directing the creative force that has been operating through you all along. The question is never whether you're creating through imagination. You are, without exception. The only question is whether you're doing so consciously or unconsciously, by intention or by accident. This understanding revolutionizes how you approach every dimension of life. Health challenges are no longer random misfortunes, but opportunities to reimagine wholeness at the deepest level. Financial limitations aren't fixed realities, but invitations to form more expansive images of abundance. Relationship difficulties aren't permanent conditions, but reflections of inner images that can be transformed through conscious visualization of harmony and understanding. The practical wisdom that emerges from this revelation is both simple and profound. Watch your mental images with the same care you'd watch your actions, knowing they are determining your future experience with equal or greater force. When unwanted images arise, as they inevitably will, don't fight or resist them, which only increases their power. Instead, gently but firmly replace them with images that align with your highest vision, knowing that persistent imagination is creating your tomorrow. If you've begun noticing how specific circumstances in your life correlate with mental images you've habitually entertained, type mirror principle in the comments. This recognition marks the beginning of true creative mastery, understanding the precise relationship between your inner world and your outer experience. As we explore how to apply this principle with greater precision and effectiveness, let's examine how imagination operates, not just in creating material conditions, but in shaping the very fabric of your inner experience. This revelation transforms our understanding of prayer itself, not as pleading with an external power, but as a creative declaration modeled after the divine pattern. True prayer, in its highest form, involves saying, "Let there be light," in our own lives and circumstances, just as the Creator did at the dawn of existence. This perspective represents a complete revolution in spiritual practice. Most traditional approaches to prayer position us as supplicants, describing problems to a distant deity and hoping for intervention. But the mystical understanding Fox reveals positions prayer as a creative act, where we speak directly to conditions themselves with the same authority through which worlds were formed. When Jesus commanded storms to cease, blindness to depart, or life to return to the apparently dead, he wasn't beseeching a higher power. He was demonstrating the creative authority that comes from perfect alignment with divine mind. The revelation that catalyzes transformation is recognizing that this same creative authority is your spiritual birthright, not because you personally possess some special power, but because the same mind that created the universe flows through your consciousness. When you align with it through disciplined imagination, this alignment is what allows you to speak to circumstances with the calm certainty that they must conform to the higher pattern you're holding in consciousness. Behind the scenes of every authentic demonstration of spiritual power lies this hidden mechanism, the conscious use of imagination to conceive conditions not as they appear to physical senses, but as they exist in divine perfection. When you understand this principle, you no longer waste energy fighting against unwanted conditions or pleading for their removal. Instead, you simply hold the image of their perfect resolution with such clarity and conviction that manifestation becomes inevitable. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what Fox identifies as the essential catalyst that transforms imagination from idle fantasy into creative power: faith. In its purest essence, faith isn't blind belief or baseless hope. It's the capacity to imagine with absolute certainty that something is already real at the spiritual level, even when physical senses report its absence. This definition revolutionizes our understanding of both imagination and faith, revealing them as complementary aspects of the same creative process. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that faith isn't about convincing yourself to believe in something despite evidence to the contrary. It's about training your consciousness to perceive and accept the spiritual reality that already exists beyond physical appearance. Just as quantum physics reveals that solid matter is mostly empty space vibrating at specific frequencies, spiritual metaphysics reveals that physical conditions are simply energy patterns that can be transformed through the higher vibration of faith-filled imagination. Consider the mindset shift this represents. Instead of hoping circumstances might change if you're worthy enough or pray hard enough, you recognize that the desired condition already exists in the spiritual realm. Your task is simply to align your consciousness with it through faithful imagination. This isn't magical thinking. It's working in harmony with the creative principle through which all things came into being. The universe itself began with an act of faith, divine imagination, conceiving light where darkness appeared to be the only reality. The practical application of this understanding transforms every aspect of your spiritual practice. When faced with illness, you don't imagine health as a distant possibility. You imagine it with the certainty that perfect wholeness already exists as the spiritual template of your being. When confronted with financial limitation, you don't visualize abundance as a future state. You imagine it with the conviction that infinite supply is already established in divine mind, needing only your recognition to flow into manifestation. This perspective illuminates why Jesus taught, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." The revelation isn't that belief somehow convinces God to grant your request. It's that belief itself, as an act of faith-filled imagination, aligns your consciousness with what already exists in the spiritual realm, allowing it to manifest in your experience. This is why genuine faith isn't strained or forced. It's the calm certainty that comes from perceiving reality from a higher dimension. The journey toward mastery involves daily practice in this form of spiritual perception, training your imagination to conceive with such clarity and your faith to accept with such certainty that the gap between conception and manifestation naturally closes. This isn't about denying present conditions or engaging in positive thinking as psychological technique. It's about cultivating the spiritual vision that sees beyond appearances to the underlying reality from which all appearances emerge. If you've experienced moments when you somehow just knew something would manifest despite all evidence to the contrary, and it did, type faith vision in the comments. These weren't coincidences, but glimpses of your natural capacity to perceive beyond physical limitation into the realm where creation actually begins. As we continue exploring the practical application of imagination as divine creative power, let's examine how this understanding transforms our approach to life's most challenging circumstances. Chapter 3 of Fox's illuminating teaching unveils a perspective on human suffering that completely reframes our traditional understanding of the fall of man, not as a historical event or divine punishment, but as the misuse of our imaginative faculty, the very power meant to connect us with divine reality. This revelation offers a profound alternative to conventional religious narratives. The fall wasn't about eating forbidden fruit in a literal garden. It represents the moment human consciousness began, using imagination to focus on division rather than unity, lack rather than abundance, fear rather than love. The root of human suffering isn't divine judgment, but the natural consequence of misdirecting our creative power toward what we don't want rather than what we do want. Consider the paradigm shift this represents. The challenges we face aren't arbitrary tests or punishments, but the natural manifestation of images we've held collectively and individually, often without realizing their creative power. This understanding doesn't dismiss genuine suffering or blame victims for their circumstances. Rather, it illuminates the hidden mechanism through which consciousness shapes experience, offering a pathway to freedom that doesn't depend on external intervention. The journey towards spiritual awakening begins with this humbling realization: the world we experience reflects the images we've entertained. When humanity began imagining separation from source, scarcity amid abundance, and conflict amid potential harmony, these mental patterns inevitably manifested as the conditions we now call fallen or broken. The transformation comes not through fighting against these conditions, but through redirecting imagination toward their healing. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identified as the hidden source of all suffering: mistaken mental images held with the emotion of fear or guilt. This insight penetrates to the very root of human pain, showing that suffering isn't inherent to existence, but arises from consciousness misaligned with spiritual reality. Every form of limitation, disease, conflict, or lack can be traced to specific thought patterns energized by negative emotion and accepted as truth. Behind the scenes of every persistent challenge is this hidden factor. Images of limitation have become so familiar, so emotionally charged, and so deeply accepted that they've crystallized into physical conditions. The intensity of emotion attached to a mental image acts as the catalyst that accelerates its manifestation. Fear-charged images manifest rapidly, while love-empowered images create with equal force, but in the opposite direction. This explains why both catastrophic thinking and inspired vision tend to fulfill themselves. Both are forms of emotionally charged imagination. The revelation that transforms lives is recognizing that you're not doomed to perpetuate the fall in your own experience. At any moment, you can begin using imagination as it was originally intended, to conceive and manifest conditions that reflect divine harmony rather than human fear. This isn't about denying challenges or engaging in simplistic positive thinking. It's about understanding the creative mechanism at the heart of experience and consciously directing it toward healing rather than further suffering. The practical application of this understanding is both simple and profound. Begin consciously replacing mistaken mental images with those that reflect spiritual truth. Where you've imagined lack, deliberately visualize abundance. Where you've conceived illness, intentionally picture perfect health. Where you've envisioned conflict, consciously create images of harmony. This practice isn't mere psychological technique, it's the precise recalibration of your creative faculty to its divine purpose. Consider how this perspective illuminates the journey of transformation. You aren't trying to force reality to conform to your desires. You're allowing your imagination to align with the perfect pattern that already exists in divine mind. This alignment isn't achieved through struggle or strain, but through the gentle, persistent redirection of attention from appearance to spiritual reality. Just as darkness doesn't need to be fought but simply replaced with light, mistaken images don't need to be battled but simply exchanged for true ones. The process requires patience and persistence precisely because we've invested so much emotional energy in our current mental patterns. The images that have created our present experience weren't formed overnight, and their transformation follows the same natural timing. Yet, with consistent practice in redirected imagination, you'll begin experiencing what mystics throughout the ages have called miracles, the natural result of consciousness realigned with divine reality. If you've begun noticing how specific challenges in your life correlate with mental images you've habitually entertained with emotional intensity, type conscious redirection in the comments. This recognition marks the beginning of reclaiming your imaginative power from unconscious patterns and directing it toward conscious creation. As we explore the practical application of this understanding to specific life circumstances, let's examine how redirected imagination becomes the pathway to authentic spiritual redemption. Fox's revolutionary insight reframes our entire understanding of redemption, not as something bestowed upon us from outside, but as the conscious correction of our own imaginative faculty. In this light, salvation isn't about being rescued from divine punishment, but about recalibrating our creative power to its original purpose. The transformation begins with this profound realization: redemption is fundamentally the correction of imagination. Every time you consciously replace an image of separation with one of unity, illness with health, lack with abundance, or conflict with harmony, you're participating in your own spiritual redemption. This isn't about earning divine favor through right thinking. It's about aligning your consciousness with the divine pattern that already exists, allowing it to manifest through your purified imagination. This perspective illuminates why spiritual masters throughout history have emphasized repentance, a word that in its original meaning signifies a change of mind or perception. True repentance isn't feeling bad about mistakes. It's literally reimagining your relationship with reality from the perspective of unity rather than separation. It's seeing with new eyes, perceiving beyond appearances to the spiritual truth that transcends all illusion. The practical pathway to this transformation involves consistent practice in mental correction. When your mind presents images of fear, gently but firmly replace them with images of love. When thoughts of scarcity arise, consciously substitute visions of abundance. When your imagination dwells on conflict, deliberately redirect it toward harmony. This practice isn't about forcing positive thinking, it's about returning imagination to its divine function as the bridge between spiritual reality and human experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identifies as the ultimate source of true imagination, the inner Christ that dwells within each person as their spiritual essence. Chapter 4 introduces this revolutionary concept not as religious symbolism, but as practical metaphysics. The recognition that within your consciousness exists a pure center of divine awareness, untouched by error or limitation, always available as the source of true creative vision. The revelation that transforms seekers into finders is recognizing that you don't need to manufacture healing images through human effort. You need only to quiet the chattering surface mind and allow the perfect images that already exist in your spiritual nature to rise into awareness. The inner Christ isn't a theological concept, it's the practical reality of your divine identity, the part of you that remains in perfect unity with Source regardless of outer appearances. Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual healing, every genuine transformation, lies this hidden factor. Someone accessed the inner Christ, the pure source of divine imagination, allowing it to reshape their perception beyond appearances to spiritual reality. Jesus demonstrated this principle perfectly when he looked beyond physical conditions to see wholeness where others saw only disease. He wasn't imposing his personal will on reality. He was perceiving from the Christ mind within him, the same mind that now seeks expression through you. The journey toward mastery involves daily practice in shifting from surface consciousness to this deeper awareness. This isn't achieved through strain or complicated techniques, but through the simple decision to quiet mental chatter and open to the perfect vision already present in your spiritual nature. In moments of stillness, when the agitated human mind subsides, the inner Christ naturally reveals itself through intuitive flashes, spontaneous insights, and perfect images that transcend your normal thinking patterns. Consider the profound implications for your approach to life challenges. Rather than struggling to overcome problems through personal willpower or positive thinking techniques, you can learn to access the part of you that already sees the perfect solution. Rather than trying to heal illness through human determination, you can allow the inner Christ to reveal the perfect pattern of health already established in divine mind. This shift from human striving to divine receptivity represents the essence of spiritual redemption. The practical application unfolds naturally. When facing any challenge, pause, take a deep breath, mentally acknowledge the presence of the inner Christ as your true identity. Then simply ask, how does divine vision perceive this situation? Wait in receptive stillness. allowing the perfect image to form naturally rather than forcing it through mental effort. The insight that emerges won't be a strained human concept, but a clear reflection of spiritual reality, perfect in its simplicity, yet profound in its transformative power. This practice reveals the hidden truth that divine imagination isn't something you acquire or develop. It's your natural inheritance that only needs to be recognized and expressed. The inner Christ has never ceased perceiving with perfect vision. Only the human mind, absorbed in appearances, has forgotten how to access this divine perspective. Your spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about remembering who you've been all along, beneath the layers of conditional thinking. If you've experienced moments when perfect insight or clarity suddenly emerged not through mental effort, but through inner stillness, type Christ mind in the comments. These weren't random occurrences, but glimpses of your true nature shining through the clouds of conditioned thinking, the inner Christ revealing itself as your authentic identity. As we continue exploring the practical mechanics of spiritual creation through imagination, let's examine the precise laws that govern how mental images translate into physical experience. Perhaps the most revolutionary statement Jesus ever made was this: the kingdom of God is within you. This wasn't poetic metaphor or distant promise. It was a practical revelation about where to find the source of all healing, all abundance, and all loving relationships. The transformation begins when you recognize that you've been looking in the wrong direction, seeking outside what can only be found within. The breakthrough moment in your spiritual journey arrives when you stop searching externally for solutions and begin accessing the kingdom within, that pure center of divine consciousness where perfect images already exist. This inner realm isn't a physical location, but a state of awareness where your individual consciousness touches the infinite mind of God. It's the sacred meeting place where divine imagination can flow unobstructed through your perception, revealing possibilities invisible to ordinary sight. When Jesus performed miracles, he wasn't manipulating reality through supernatural power. He was simply perceiving from this inner kingdom, allowing its perfect vision to replace distorted human perception. The blind man wasn't healed through magical intervention, but through contact with a consciousness that could see only wholeness, where others saw only limitation. This same healing consciousness, the Christ mind, exists within you now, waiting to be recognized and expressed through your redirected imagination. The practical application transforms every aspect of your spiritual practice. When facing illness, you no longer plead with an external God for healing or struggle to visualize health through personal effort. Instead, you quiet the surface mind and turn within, allowing the Christ consciousness to reveal the perfect pattern of health already established in divine mind. This isn't visualization as human technique, it's receptivity to divine vision, accessing images that originate not from conditioned thinking, but from the kingdom within. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identifies as the essence of true redemption, recognition of, and cooperation with the inner Christ. This perspective completely reframes the spiritual journey from seeking external salvation to awakening to the divine presence already established within your consciousness. Redemption isn't something bestowed upon you by an outside authority. It's the natural result of aligning your awareness with the Christ mind already present as your spiritual identity. Behind the scenes of every authentic transformation is this hidden factor. Someone stopped struggling against conditions through human willpower and instead surrendered to the divine wisdom within, allowing it to reshape both their perception and their experience. True redemption occurs not when you overcome challenges through personal strength, but when you step aside and allow the inner Christ to perceive and create through your purified imagination. This shift from human striving to divine receptivity represents the essence of spiritual awakening, Consider the profound paradigm shift this represents. You're not trying to convince God to assist you. You're learning to see as God sees through the divine presence already established in your consciousness. You're not attempting to improve yourself through spiritual techniques. You're allowing your true self, the inner Christ, to express its inherent perfection through your thoughts, feelings, and actions. This isn't self-improvement, but self-revelation, uncovering the divine pattern that has been your true identity all along. The journey toward mastery involves daily practice in this sacred recognition. Each morning, acknowledge the presence of the Christ within not as religious concept, but as living reality. Throughout the day, in moments of decision or challenge, pause to ask, how would the Christ mind perceive this situation? Then simply listen, allowing divine wisdom to rise naturally into awareness without forcing or straining. The insights that emerge won't be complicated strategies, but clear, simple perspectives that illuminate the path forward with remarkable precision. This perspective illuminates why spiritual masters throughout history have emphasized dying to self, not as punishment or sacrifice, but as the natural surrendering of limited human perception to the divine vision that already exists within. When Jesus said, "I can of myself do nothing," he wasn't diminishing his capabilities, but acknowledging the true source of his creative power, the inner Christ that worked through his purified imagination to manifest miracles, harmony, and loving transformation. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that this same Christ consciousness, this same divine presence, dwells within you now as your authentic identity. It has never left you, never abandoned you, never ceased perceiving with perfect vision. It has simply waited patiently for your recognition, for your cooperation, for your permission to express its inherent perfection through your imagination, through your words, through your actions. This recognition and cooperation with the inner Christ isn't just spiritual practice, it's true redemption. If you've experienced moments when you stepped beyond personal striving and allowed something greater to work through you, bringing clarity, healing, or unexpected resolution, type divine cooperation in the comments. These weren't coincidences, but glimpses of what becomes possible when you align with the Christ mind within, allowing its perfect vision to reshape both your perception and your experienced reality. As we continue exploring how to access and express this divine presence in daily life, let's examine the precise mental laws through which imagination, guided by the inner Christ, shapes your entire life experience. Chapter 5 of Fox's illuminating teaching unveils what might be called the constitution of the universe, the fundamental law governing all creation. Every sustained mental image inevitably manifests in physical form. This isn't philosophy or religious doctrine. It's spiritual physics operating with mathematical precision in your life right now. Just as the physical world operates according to predictable principles like gravity and electromagnetism, the mental realm functions through equally reliable laws. The most fundamental of these is the principle that consciousness is causative. What you hold persistently in mind with emotional conviction must eventually externalize in your experience. This law doesn't operate sporadically or unpredictably. It functions with perfect consistency, regardless of whether you understand it or even believe in it. The revelation that transforms seekers into conscious creators is recognizing that this law isn't punishing or rewarding you. It's simply reflecting back to you the dominant patterns you've established in your mental field. Like a faithful mirror, it shows you precisely what you've been imagining with sufficient persistence to manifest. This understanding removes both blame and victimhood from your worldview, replacing them with the empowering recognition of your role as the conscious director of your life experience. Behind the scenes of this extraordinary creative process is a simple truth that mystics throughout history have recognized. Form follows consciousness. The outer world doesn't happen to you by random chance or arbitrary fate. It happens through you as the natural expression of your sustained mental images. Every relationship, every health condition, every financial circumstance first existed as a pattern in your mind before crystallizing as visible experience. This isn't metaphorical, it's the literal mechanism through which reality is formed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identifies as the universal principle of harvest. The law gives to each according to what they have sown in their mental field. This agricultural metaphor perfectly captures the precise relationship between imagination and manifestation. Just as a farmer can't plant corn and expect to harvest wheat, you can't hold images of limitation, conflict, or illness and expect to experience abundance, harmony, or health. The harvest always corresponds exactly to the seed. The mindset revolution begins when you recognize that this law isn't a punishment system, but a creative mechanism designed to give you direct feedback about your mental patterns. When unwanted conditions appear in your life, they're not random misfortunes or divine tests. They're the natural harvest of seeds you've sown, often unconsciously, through habitual imagination. This understanding doesn't induce guilt, but offers liberation. If conditions are created through mental imagery, they can be transformed through the same process. Consider the profound implications for your approach to personal transformation. You don't need to struggle against unwanted circumstances through force of will or manipulation of external factors. You simply need to change the seed, the mental image, allowing the law to naturally produce a different harvest. This isn't wishful thinking or simplistic positive affirmation. It's working in conscious partnership with the fundamental creative principle of the universe. The journey toward mastery involves becoming as deliberate with your mental seeds as a farmer is with physical seeds. You wouldn't randomly scatter mixed seeds across a field and expect a coherent harvest. Similarly, you can't allow your imagination to wander indiscriminately through fear, doubt, and limitation while expecting a harvest of harmony, abundance, and fulfillment. The precision of your harvest directly reflects the quality of your mental sowing. This understanding illuminates why two people can face identical external circumstances, yet experience completely different outcomes. One plants mental seeds of opportunity, learning, and growth. The other sows images of victimhood, helplessness, and defeat. Though starting from the same external conditions, their harvests inevitably differ because they've planted fundamentally different mental seeds. This isn't about denial or ignoring challenges. It's about choosing how to interpret and respond to them through conscious imagination. The practical application transforms every aspect of daily life. Begin each morning by consciously planting seeds of what you wish to harvest: health, abundance, loving relationships, meaningful work. Throughout the day, notice when you're unconsciously sowing unwanted seeds through worry, resentment, or fear. Gently but firmly replace these with images aligned with your desired harvest. This practice isn't complicated, but it requires the same consistency a farmer brings to tending crops: daily attention, proper nourishment, patient expectation of the harvest. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that this law functions with absolute impartiality. It doesn't favor certain people over others or respond to begging, pleading, or manipulation. It simply and perfectly reflects back to each person exactly what they've sown in their mental field without exception. Your harvest isn't determined by luck, status, or even apparent deservingness. It's determined solely by the quality of seed you've planted in consciousness. If you're beginning to recognize patterns between what you've consistently imagined with emotional intensity and what has manifested in your experience, type "seed" and "harvest" in the comments. This recognition marks the beginning of conscious partnership with the mental law, allowing you to create deliberately rather than by default. As we explore how to apply this understanding with greater precision and effectiveness. Let's examine the revolutionary concept of scientific prayer, the conscious use of imagination to co-create with divine intelligence. The transformative revelation at the heart of Fox's teaching completely inverts how most people approach faith. Faith means believing to see, not waiting to see to believe. This profound reversal of conventional thinking illuminates why many spiritual seekers remain trapped in cycles of limitation, despite sincere efforts to transform their circumstances. The breakthrough moment in your spiritual journey arrives when you grasp that faith isn't the reward for seeing evidence, it's the prerequisite for manifestation. This understanding fundamentally rewires how you approach every challenge, opportunity, and desire. Instead of demanding proof before belief, you recognize that belief itself creates the pathway through which manifestation occurs. This isn't blind faith or wishful thinking. It's understanding the sequential nature of creation. Consciousness always precedes form, just as the architect's vision precedes the physical building. Consider the mindset revolution this represents. When facing illness, you don't wait until symptoms disappear to believe in health. You believe in perfect wholeness first, allowing that faith-filled imagination to reshape cellular activity. When confronted with financial limitation, you don't wait for money to appear before believing in abundance. You imagine from the consciousness of plenty first, opening pathways for manifestation that were invisible to scarcity thinking. This approach doesn't deny current conditions. It simply refuses to grant them creative power over future experience. Behind the scenes of every authentic demonstration of spiritual principle is this hidden factor. Someone dared to believe before seeing, to hold the image of completion with such conviction that current circumstances lost their apparent solidity. This quality of faith isn't naive optimism or psychological technique. It's activating the fundamental creative sequence established at the foundation of existence. First consciousness, then form. First imagine, then experience. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identifies in Chapter 6 as the essence of true prayer, imagining in union with God rather than begging or lamenting. This revelation transforms prayer from religious ritual to creative partnership, not pleading with a distant deity to change conditions, but aligning imagination with divine intelligence to create conditions that reflect spiritual reality. The word prayer itself comes from a root meaning to set before, essentially to hold in consciousness with clarity and conviction. The revelation that has transformed countless lives is recognizing that prayer in its highest form isn't telling God what you need or want. It's imagining from God's perspective, seeing through divine eyes rather than human limitation. When Jesus healed, he didn't beg for divine intervention. He simply perceived from a consciousness united with Source, allowing that unified vision to naturally manifest wholeness where others saw only disease. This same unified consciousness is available within you now, waiting to express through your sanctified imagination. The journey toward mastery involves daily practice in this elevated form of prayer, not as religious obligation, but as the natural expression of your divine partnership. Begin by quieting the human mind with its concerns, analyses, and fears. Then consciously align with the inner Christ, allowing it to reveal how the situation appears from divine perspective. The images that emerge won't be strained human concepts, but clear reflections of spiritual reality, wholeness rather than disease, abundance rather than lack, harmony rather than conflict. This perspective illuminates why Jesus taught, "When you pray, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." The revelation isn't that belief convinces God to grant your request. It's that belief itself as an act of imagination unified with divine mind, activates the creative process through which manifestation occurs. This understanding liberates prayer from superstition and transforms it into spiritual science, the conscious application of universal laws through directed imagination. Consider the paradigm shift this represents for your spiritual practice. You're not attempting to influence God through fervent appeals or repetitious affirmations. You're learning to see as God sees, to imagine from divine consciousness rather than human limitation. This isn't about using the right words or techniques to get what you want. It's about elevating your consciousness to the level where you naturally perceive and create from wholeness rather than fragmentary human perspective. The practical application transforms every dimension of your spiritual life. When challenges arise, you don't react with fear, analysis, or desperate pleading. You simply quiet the human mind and ask, how does this situation appear from divine perspective? Then wait in receptive stillness, allowing unified consciousness to reveal images that transcend the apparent problem. This practice isn't complicated, but it represents a complete reversal of conventional approaches to prayer, moving from human striving to divine receptivity, from telling to listening, from asking to receiving. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that imagination, when aligned with divine intelligence, becomes the most powerful form of prayer possible. Not because it manipulates reality, but because it reveals reality from a higher dimension than physical appearance. True prayer isn't about changing external conditions directly. It's about changing your perception to align with divine vision, allowing that aligned consciousness to naturally manifest conditions that reflect spiritual reality. If you've experienced moments when prayer felt less like asking and more like seeing from a higher perspective, receiving clarity, insight, or vision that transcended your normal thinking, type unified vision in the comments. These weren't random occurrences, but glimpses of what becomes possible when imagination operates not from separated human consciousness, but from union with divine mind. As we explore how to bring this elevated understanding of prayer into practical application, let's examine the extraordinary potential of imagination when directed toward healing the physical body. What Fox reveals about scientific prayer represents nothing less than a complete revolution in spiritual practice. Unlike conventional approaches that focus on beseeching an external power, scientific prayer involves mentally forming the clear image of the desired result and holding it regardless of appearances. This isn't wishful thinking or auto-suggestion. It's consciously participating in the same creative process through which the universe itself came into being. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that prayer at its essence is imagination aligned with spiritual truth. When you mentally form the image of perfect health, despite physical symptoms, abundance despite apparent lack, or harmony despite visible conflict, you're not denying reality. You're perceiving from a dimension where these conditions already exist in their perfect form. Scientific prayer isn't about convincing God to change conditions. It's about elevating consciousness to the level where you naturally create from wholeness rather than limitation. Consider the profound implications for your approach to life challenges. Instead of fixating on problems, analyzing symptoms, or describing limitations in detail, which only strengthens their mental impression, you consciously form the image of the completed solution, the perfect healing, the harmonious resolution. You hold this image, not with strain or desperate hope, but with the calm certainty that comes from understanding the creative laws of the universe. This practice requires mental discipline precisely because the senses continually report contrary evidence, tempting you to abandon your vision and return to limitation thinking. Behind the scenes of every authentic demonstration of spiritual power is this hidden factor. Someone maintained the mental image of perfection with such unwavering conviction that apparent reality eventually conformed to their vision. This maintenance of vision, despite contradictory appearances, isn't stubbornness or denial. It's understanding that physical conditions are simply the delayed reflection of past consciousness, while the maintained mental image is creating the future experience. The quality of your holding determines the clarity of your manifestation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Fox identifies in Chapter 7 as perhaps the most transformative application of imagination: forgiveness as the purification of consciousness through releasing toxic mental images. This perspective completely reframes our understanding of forgiveness, not as a moral obligation or act of magnanimity toward others, but as the essential purification of our own creative instrument. Every image of resentment, blame, or judgment held in consciousness becomes a toxic seed that inevitably produces a harvest of limitation in our experience. The revelation that transforms lives is recognizing that unforgiveness doesn't punish the other person. It poisons your own imaginal field, creating distortions in your creative faculty that manifest as limitations in health, relationships, and material circumstances. The process of forgiveness isn't about condoning harmful behavior or pretending injury didn't occur. It's about consciously releasing mental images that, if maintained, will continue creating discord in your experience regardless of their apparent justification. The journey toward mastery involves honest inventory of the mental images you've been harboring, memories of hurt, scenes of betrayal, pictures of injustice, recognizing them not merely as records of past events, but as active creative forces shaping your present and future experience. True forgiveness begins with the humbling realization that maintaining these images hurts only you, contaminating your consciousness with the very qualities you resent in others. The liberation comes through deliberately releasing these images, replacing them with visions of wholeness, understanding, and divine love. Consider the mindset revolution this represents. You aren't forgiving others because they deserve it or because it's morally virtuous. You're purifying your own creative instrument because you deserve the freedom that comes when imagination is liberated from toxic images. This perspective transforms forgiveness from occasional spiritual practice to essential mental housekeeping, the consistent clearing of imagination so it can fulfill its divine function as the bridge between spiritual reality and human experience. The practical application profoundly impacts every dimension of life. When memories of injury arise, don't suppress them or pretend they don't exist. Instead, consciously recognize them as mental constructs that will create more pain if maintained. Then deliberately release them, not through force or denial, but through the gentle, yet powerful replacement of toxic images with those of healing, completion, and divine understanding. This practice isn't instantaneous, but cumulative, gradually purifying imagination until it naturally creates only what reflects your highest good. This understanding illuminates why spiritual masters throughout history have emphasized forgiveness not as moral obligation, but as practical necessity for anyone seeking transformation. The consciousness filled with images of grievance, judgment, and condemnation simply cannot simultaneously produce harmony, abundance, and wholeness. The law of creative imagination functions with mathematical precision. What you hold in mind with persistent emotion must manifest according to its kind. Purification isn't optional. It's the essential foundation for authentic spiritual creation. If you've experienced moments when releasing a long-held grievance or resentment seemed to mysteriously open doors to new possibilities or healing in your life, type mental liberation in the comments. These weren't coincidences, but demonstrations of this very principle: purified imagination naturally creating from wholeness rather than fragmentation. As we continue exploring the extraordinary creative potential of purified imagination, let's examine the inseparable relationship between faith and imagination in manifesting the kingdom of heaven within. The profound insight Fox reveals about mental recreation of past harm penetrates to the very root of why many spiritual seekers remain trapped in cycles of limitation despite sincere efforts to transform their circumstances. Every time we mentally revisit scenes of injury, betrayal, or injustice, replaying them in vivid detail with the accompanying emotions of anger, hurt, or resentment, we're not merely remembering the past, we're actively recreating these experiences in the present moment. This revelation illuminates the hidden mechanism behind persistent suffering, not as divine punishment or arbitrary fate, but as the natural consequence of imagination repeatedly focused on painful events. The mind doesn't distinguish between original experience and vivid recollection. Both generate the same biochemical responses, emotional patterns, and energetic signatures. When you mentally relive past harm with emotional intensity, you're essentially instructing your creative faculty to produce more experiences that match the feeling quality of those memories. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that your imagination doesn't know the difference between remembering and creating. It simply responds to whatever images you hold with persistent emotion, manifesting conditions that correspond to their vibrational quality. This understanding doesn't diminish the reality of past injuries or suggest that harmful actions should be ignored. Rather, it empowers you to stop the unconscious perpetuation of suffering by consciously redirecting imagination from past pain toward present possibility. Behind the scenes of every cycle of repeated suffering is this hidden factor, not the original injury itself, but its persistent mental recreation through detailed remembrance, emotional rehearsal, and habitual storytelling. The injury may have happened once, but through undisciplined imagination, we subject ourselves to it hundreds or thousands of times, each recreation strengthening neural pathways and emotional patterns that attract similar experiences. Liberation begins not with changing others or external circumstances, but with changing the mental images we persistently entertain. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Fox identifies in Chapter 8 as the transformative partnership between faith and imagination in creating a new life. These two spiritual faculties, often treated separately in religious teaching, are revealed as inseparable companions in the art of conscious creation. Imagination without faith remains mere fantasy, while faith without imagination lacks the clear template necessary for manifestation. When unified, these divine gifts become the most powerful creative force available to human consciousness. The revelation that transforms seekers into finders is recognizing that faith is not blind belief in unseen possibilities, but the capacity to perceive reality from a dimension beyond physical appearance. This perceptive quality of faith doesn't deny current conditions, but sees through them to the spiritual reality that transcends all temporal appearances. Similarly, imagination in its highest function isn't idle daydreaming, but the faculty through which divine patterns are received and held in consciousness until they manifest in visible form. Consider the mindset revolution this represents. You're not struggling to believe in something contrary to evidence or forcing yourself to visualize outcomes that seem impossible. You're learning to perceive from a higher dimension, the kingdom within, where perfect patterns already exist, using imagination as the instrument through which these patterns are brought into focus and held with calm certainty until they materialize. This unified action of faith and imagination isn't strained effort, but natural function, like the eye perceiving light or the ear detecting sound. The journey toward mastery involves daily practice in this unified faculty, not as separate techniques, but as complementary aspects of the same creative process. When facing any challenge, Allow faith to elevate perception beyond appearances to the spiritual reality where perfect resolution already exists. Then use imagination to form a clear mental image of this resolution, holding it not with anxious hope, but with serene knowing. This practice isn't forcing reality to conform to personal desire. It's allowing higher reality to express through purified imagination. This understanding illuminates why Jesus taught, "According to your faith, it will be done unto you." The revelation isn't that stronger belief produces better results, but that faith and imagination together determine the quality of your creative activity. What you perceive through faith becomes the template your imagination holds. What your imagination holds becomes the pattern your experience reflects. This creative sequence operates with mathematical precision, whether you understand it or not, whether you direct it consciously or allow it to function by default. The practical application transforms every dimension of life. Begin each day by consciously unifying faith and imagination, perceiving beyond appearances to spiritual reality, then forming clear mental images that reflect this higher perception. Throughout the day, notice when imagination wanders into limitation thinking based on sensory evidence. Gently but firmly redirect it to images that align with faith's higher vision. This practice isn't complicated, but it represents a complete reversal of conventional thinking that bases imagination on what eyes can see rather than what faith perceives. If you've experienced moments when you somehow just knew something was possible despite all evidence to the contrary, and held that vision until it manifested, type "creative partnership" in the comments. These weren't coincidences but demonstrations of faith and imagination working together as they were designed to function, perceiving and creating from the kingdom within rather than reacting to appearances without. As we continue, exploring the extraordinary creative potential of this divine partnership, let's examine how faith-filled imagination transforms our perception of circumstances that appear limiting or challenging. The central spiritual task Fox illuminates isn't struggling against unwanted conditions or even trying to change them directly. It's developing the capacity to see beyond appearances to the spiritual reality that transcends all temporal limitations. This perceptive ability doesn't deny current circumstances, but recognizes them as reflections of past consciousness rather than determinants of future experience. The breakthrough moment in your spiritual journey arrives when you grasp that seeing beyond appearances isn't pretending problems don't exist. It's recognizing a deeper dimension of reality where perfect patterns already exist, regardless of what physical senses report. When confronted with illness, this elevated vision doesn't ignore symptoms, but sees through them to the template of perfect health that remains unchanged in divine mind. When facing financial limitation, it doesn't deny current scarcity, but perceives beyond it to the spiritual reality of infinite abundance that transcends material fluctuations. Consider the profound paradigm shift this represents. You're not attempting to convince yourself that what you see isn't real. You're developing the capacity to perceive from a higher dimension where perfect patterns exist as living reality, regardless of temporary conditions. This perceptive ability isn't wishful thinking or psychological technique. It's activating spiritual vision, the capacity to see as God sees, beyond the distortions of human perception limited by time, space, and physical appearance. Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual healing or transformation is this hidden factor. Someone developed the capacity to see beyond appearances with such unwavering clarity that their perception actually reshaped the malleable substance of reality. When Jesus restored sight to the blind, he wasn't manipulating physical conditions through supernatural power. He was seeing with such perfect spiritual vision that his perception naturally manifested as visible transformation. This same perceptive capacity exists within you as your divine inheritance, waiting to be developed through consistent practice. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing what Fox identifies in Chapter 9 as perhaps the most liberating insight about reality. The universe is naturally and inherently abundant, and scarcity exists only as a human construct created through distorted imagination. This revelation completely inverts conventional thinking about prosperity, not as something to be achieved through struggle or acquired through effort, but as the natural state of being that becomes visible when imagination is freed from limitation thinking. The transformation begins with this profound realization: abundance isn't something you create. It's something you reveal by removing the mental constructs that have obscured your perception of what already exists. The universe itself operates on principles of infinite expansion, generosity, and overflow. Look at nature. Fields produce thousands of seeds from a single plant. Oceans teem with countless life forms. Stars fill the night sky in numbers beyond comprehension. This natural abundance reflects the true nature of divine mind, eternally creative, infinitely expressing, endlessly giving. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that scarcity exists not as objective reality, but as a powerful thought form projected by collective human consciousness. This projection doesn't change the abundant nature of the universe, but it does filter individual perception, causing many to experience limitation despite living in a cosmos of infinite supply. The journey toward prosperity consciousness involves deliberately dismantling these mental constructs through redirected imagination, not creating abundance where it doesn't exist, but removing the perceptual filters that have prevented you from experiencing what has been available all along. Consider the fundamental mindset revolution this represents. You're not struggling to manifest prosperity in a limited world. You're learning to align your perception with the abundant reality that already exists beyond human constructs of scarcity. This alignment isn't achieved through affirmations or visualization techniques alone, but through the profound recognition that limitation exists primarily in consciousness, not in the nature of reality itself. When imagination is liberated from scarcity programming, abundance naturally becomes visible, just as landscapes become visible when fog disperses. The practical application transforms your entire relationship with prosperity. Begin by questioning every assumption about limitation, as if investigating a curious belief system rather than objective reality. Notice how these assumptions were inherited from family patterns, cultural conditioning, or personal experience, not as immutable truths, but as interpretive frameworks that can be consciously replaced. Then, deliberately redirect imagination toward evidence of abundance that surrounds you constantly, but may have been filtered from conscious awareness by scarcity programming. This perspective illuminates why some individuals thrive under conditions where others struggle, why opportunities appear for certain people that remain invisible to others, standing in the same place. The difference isn't in external circumstances, but in the perceptual framework through which reality is experienced. Two people can face identical financial conditions, yet perceive entirely different possibilities based on whether their imagination is programmed for scarcity or abundance. The universe responds not to objective conditions, but to the quality of consciousness perceiving those conditions. If you've experienced moments when shifting your perception suddenly revealed opportunities or resources that were present all along, but somehow invisible to your previous mindset, type abundance vision in the comments. These weren't coincidences, but glimpses of what becomes possible when imagination is liberated from scarcity, constructs to align with the abundant nature of the universe itself. As we continue exploring how to develop this liberated perception in practical ways, let's examine the extraordinary healing potential of imagination when directed toward physical conditions that appear limiting or challenging. Chapter 10 of Fox's illuminating teaching unveils a perspective on health and healing that completely transforms our understanding of the body, not as a mechanical system operating independently of consciousness, but as a living mirror reflecting with perfect fidelity the images held persistently in mind. This revelation repositions healing from medical intervention to conscious imagination, from treating symptoms to transforming the mental patterns creating those symptoms. The breakthrough moment in your healing journey arrives when you recognize that your body isn't a separate entity you inhabit, but a responsive instrument that faithfully expresses the dominant images in your consciousness. Every cell, tissue, organ, and system constantly responds to mental directives, reorganizing physical structure to align with whatever patterns you hold with emotional conviction. This doesn't minimize the value of medical care or practical treatment, but reveals the deeper dimension of healing that occurs at the level of consciousness itself. Consider the profound implications for your approach to health challenges. When symptoms appear, they're not random misfortunes or meaningless biological malfunctions. They're feedback about mental patterns that have crystallized into physical form. The pathway to authentic healing involves not just addressing symptoms externally, but transforming the internal images that created those symptoms, replacing limitation with wholeness, fear with love, tension with peace. This transformation occurs not through forced positive thinking, but through reunion with the divine template of perfect health that exists unchanged in spiritual reality. Behind the scenes of every extraordinary healing is this hidden factor. Someone redirected imagination from elaborating on illness to holding the image of perfect wholeness with such clarity and conviction that the body naturally reorganized to express this pattern. When Jesus healed, he wasn't manipulating physical conditions through supernatural intervention. He was seeing with such perfect spiritual vision that his perception naturally manifested as visible transformation. This same healing consciousness exists within you as your divine inheritance, waiting to be accessed through purified imagination. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Fox identifies in Chapter 11 as the cornerstone principle underlying all authentic manifestation. According to your faith, it will be done. This profound teaching from Jesus reveals the precise mechanism through which consciousness creates experience, not as religious doctrine, but as practical metaphysics operating with mathematical precision in every dimension of life. What you accept as possible in consciousness determines what becomes manifest in experience, without exception. The revelation that transforms seekers into healers is recognizing that this principle isn't about hoping or wishing, but about the exact correlation between inner acceptance and outer manifestation. Faith in its highest form isn't strained belief, but calm knowing, the settled consciousness that perceives beyond appearance to spiritual reality with such clarity that manifestation becomes inevitable. This quality of consciousness doesn't battle against conditions, but simply holds the perfect pattern with unwavering certainty until form naturally conforms to essence. The journey toward mastery involves developing what might be called consciousness calibration, learning to distinguish between intellectual agreement and true inner acceptance. Many spiritual seekers mentally affirm healing principles while maintaining contradictory beliefs at deeper levels of consciousness. True faith isn't a surface concept, but a state of being in which every dimension of consciousness, thoughts, emotions, expectations, and core beliefs aligns completely with the reality you wish to manifest. This alignment isn't achieved through force, but through persistent, loving redirection of attention from appearance to essence. Consider the mindset revolution this represents for your healing practice. You're not trying to convince your body to change against its will or manipulating symptoms through mental force. You're simply returning consciousness to its natural state of wholeness, allowing the body, which has never existed, separate from mind, to express this wholeness as its inherent condition. This isn't denial of symptoms, but transcendence of the consciousness that created them, not fighting against illness, but calmly establishing the pattern of health to which the body naturally responds. This understanding illuminates why Jesus emphasized, "It is done unto you according to your faith." The revelation isn't that stronger belief produces better results, but that consciousness itself is the creative principle through which all experience is formed. What you truly accept at the deepest level of being becomes your living reality, not through divine intervention, but through the natural operation of universal law. The quality of your acceptance, your faith, determines the quality of your manifestation with unfailing precision. The practical application transforms your entire approach to healing. Instead of battling symptoms, fighting disease, or struggling against conditions, you simply redirect imagination toward the perfect pattern that already exists in divine mind. You hold this pattern not with strain or desperate hope, but with calm certainty, knowing that as consciousness aligns with spiritual reality, physical conditions naturally reflect this alignment. This practice isn't instantaneous magic, but a natural process unfolding according to divine timing, the perfect pattern gradually becoming visible as consciousness stabilizes in its recognition. If you've experienced moments when a shift in your mental or emotional state seemed to produce corresponding changes in physical conditions, perhaps pain diminishing, energy increasing, or symptoms improving, type mind-body connection in the comments. These weren't coincidences, but glimpses of the precise relationship between consciousness and physical manifestation, the body faithfully mirroring the mind, just as Fox's teaching reveals. As we continue exploring how to apply these transformative principles with greater precision and effectiveness, let's examine the crucial distinction between empty fantasy and constructive imagination in the process of conscious creation. Chapter 12 of Fox's illuminating teaching unveils perhaps the most important discernment needed for successful manifestation: the clear differentiation between aimless daydreaming and authentic spiritual imagination aligned with divine will. This distinction explains why some visualizations produce powerful results, while others remain fruitless, despite sincere effort. The breakthrough moment in your creative journey arrives when you recognize that not all imaginal activity carries the same manifestation potential. Empty fantasy, the kind that drifts aimlessly through pleasant scenarios without emotional depth or spiritual alignment, lacks the creative power to reshape reality. It entertains, but doesn't transform. Constructive imagination, by contrast, operates in conscious partnership with divine intelligence, forming images that reflect not just personal desire, but spiritual reality. This elevated form of imagination doesn't merely visualize different circumstances, but perceives the perfect pattern already existing in divine mind. Consider the profound implications for your manifestation practice. The quality of your results doesn't depend on how vividly you can picture desired outcomes or how frequently you visualize them. It depends on the source from which your images originate, whether from surface personality with its fluctuating desires or from spiritual consciousness aligned with divine purpose. This understanding explains why visualizations that feel deeply right at the soul level often manifest with surprising ease, while those generated from ego striving may require enormous effort, yet produce minimal results. Behind the scenes of every authentic manifestation is this hidden factor. The image wasn't merely pictured, but embraced at every level of consciousness, from intellectual understanding to emotional acceptance to core identity. This multi-dimensional alignment doesn't occur through forced technique, but through the natural resonance that happens when imagination perceives what already exists in spiritual reality rather than inventing what personality desires. The distinction isn't about the content of the image, but its source, whether it originates from separated human consciousness or unified divine awareness. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Fox identifies in chapters 13 to 15 as advanced techniques for purifying imagination, transformative practices that elevate creative visualization from psychological technique to spiritual communion. These final chapters represent the culmination of his teaching, revealing that the ultimate purpose of imagination isn't merely to improve circumstances, but to reunite human consciousness with divine mind in the creative process. This reunion transforms not just external conditions, but the very identity of the one creating. The revelation that transforms practitioners into masters is recognizing that imagination reaches its highest potential not through increased effort or improved technique, but through purification in the silence of divine communion. When the chattering surface mind, with its analyses, fears, and strategies, grows quiet, a deeper dimension of awareness naturally emerges. In this sacred silence, imagination no longer strains to invent solutions, but simply receives the perfect patterns already existing in divine mind. This receptive quality represents imagination's most elevated function, not human creation, but divine revelation. The journey toward mastery involves daily practice in this sacred silence, not a spiritual obligation, but as the natural expression of your desire for conscious communion with Source. Begin by setting aside time each day to quiet the analytical mind, letting go of all efforts to solve problems or improve conditions through mental activity. As surface thoughts subside, simply rest in open receptivity, allowing divine mind to reveal whatever images most perfectly reflect your highest good in that moment. The visions that emerge won't be strained human concepts, but clear reflections of spiritual reality, simple, elegant solutions that transcend the complexity of separated thinking. This practice culminates in what Fox identifies as the ultimate spiritual realization. You and the Father are one in the creative process. This profound recognition completely transforms the manifestation journey from human striving to divine expression, not two separate entities collaborating, but one consciousness creating through individualized expression. The implications are extraordinary. You're not using imagination as a human tool to influence reality. You're allowing divine imagination to express through your purified consciousness, creating not from separation, but from unity with Source intelligence. Consider the paradigm shift this represents for your creative practice. You're not struggling to develop stronger visualization skills or more consistent mental discipline. You're simply removing the obstructions that have prevented divine imagination from flowing naturally through your consciousness. This shift from effort to allowance, from human creation to divine expression, represents the essence of spiritual mastery, not becoming something you're not, but revealing what you've always been beneath the layers of separated identity. The practical application transforms every dimension of your manifestation practice. Rather than forcing images through concentrated effort, you enter the silence with complete openness, allowing divine mind to reveal whatever most perfectly expresses your highest good in that moment. You hold these revealed patterns not through strained concentration, but through loving appreciation of their inherent perfection. This practice isn't about making things happen through personal power, but about allowing what already exists in spiritual reality to express through your purified imagination. If you've experienced moments of profound creative insight or perfect solutions that seem to arrive not through logical thinking, but through a sudden revelation in moments of inner quiet, Type divine inspiration in the comments. These weren't random occurrences, but glimpses of what becomes possible when imagination functions not from separated human consciousness, but from unity with divine mind. As we've journeyed together through the transformative wisdom of Emmet Fox on imagination as the divine creative faculty, I hope you've glimpsed the extraordinary potential waiting to be awakened within you. This sacred understanding of imagination as the bridge between human consciousness and divine mind has been preserved by mystics throughout the ages, precisely because of its power to transform not just circumstances, but the very experience of being human. The journey we've shared today represents just the beginning of a profound awakening to your creative partnership with the infinite. As you begin consciously directing your imaginative faculty toward what reflects your highest good, you'll discover that life itself becomes more fluid, more responsive, more aligned with the divine pattern already established in spiritual reality. The challenges won't disappear overnight, but your relationship to them will fundamentally shift as you learn to perceive beyond appearances to the perfect resolution already existing in divine mind. If something in this message resonated deeply with you, perhaps touching a place of recognition in your soul, I'd be honored if you'd type "divine imagination activated" in the comments below. Your sharing creates a field of connection with others on this same path of awakening, amplifying our collective recognition of the creative power we each carry within. And if you found genuine value in these insights, letting me know with a like creates the ripples that help this message reach others who may be searching for precisely this understanding. This journey of conscious creation through imagination continues to unfold in beautiful ways. If you're feeling called to explore these principles more deeply, subscribing to this channel ensures we can continue this exploration together. The video appearing right here takes these principles even further, showing how to apply this understanding of divine imagination to specific life challenges with extraordinary results. Click and join me there as we continue unveiling the kingdom within, the sacred realm where imagination and faith unite to manifest heaven on earth through your awakened consciousness.